Okay. The third one is Mezuzah. I'll also note, I actually produced the flyer this week. I'll send it out probably in the follow-up email from today's session, or I'll send it out next week. But our next series is going to be after Pesach. It's going to be in May. And the topic is History's Leading Anti-Semites. Whoa. History's Leading Anti-Semites. We're going to talk about, we only have 4 weeks, but we're going to talk about their relationship with the Jews, what it was that, if anything, can be identified, what it was that triggered the animosity between them and us. And it's not just going to be pure history, there's going to be philosophy in it also. I believe I have Martin Luther in the list. I have Fyodor Dostoevsky on the list. No, I did not put Torquemada on the list. I tried to represent different arenas. I had the founder of the Almohad dynasty on the list from Morocco in the 11th, 12th century. And who was the other one? Someone has it? No? No, I didn't have Bach on the list. I forgot. No, look, this is a 4-week miniseries. I just wanted to pick representatives of different eras, different types. Oh, Maria Theresa. Empress Maria Theresa was the other one that I picked. I could have picked Khmelnytsky easily, correct. But I picked Empress Maria Theresa. You'll find out.
There's a famous quote, I don't know who said that, is, anti-Semitism is hating Jews more than it is absolutely necessary.
Okay, so that's going to be the mini-series in May. In any case, the other thing that I will note for anyone who wants a pre-Passover class, I'm going to be doing a 2-parter at Beth Tikva on Monday mornings, April 1st and April 8th. And our topic is the other villains of Passover. We will be talking about Judah, Lavan, and Datan. In order, Lavan, Judah, Datan. The other villains of Passover. And you'll obviously have to discuss what that means. And there's a flyer for that too. 10 to 11. I believe I sent out the flyer for it when I sent out the email for this class. Okay, let's get started on Mezuzah. We've already eaten 2 minutes out of Mezuzah time. So what I want to talk about in this is the idea that is very popular. I think it's even come up in our classes at one point or another, that a mezuzah is more than just a scroll you put on the doorpost that has a couple of paragraphs from the Torah on it, but it actually provides protection for those who live in the dwelling. That's a familiar idea, I think? Yeah. Take a look, please, at source number 9 on your sheet from the Zohar. The Zohar here is on Parshat Va'et Hanan, which makes sense because Va'et Hanan is the first place in the Torah where you get the instruction to write a paragraph of the Torah on this mezuzah. Well, on a scroll that you're going to put on your mezuzah. Technically speaking, mezuzah means the doorpost itself. It doesn't refer to the scroll. We use the term to refer to the scroll. But take a look at number 9. Also, the mezuzah, is not the case. That's really important. It's the parchment that's inside that matters. Okay. So Rabbi Abba is speaking in this passage in the Zohar, and he says, God told Israel, many attackers are arrayed before you. Engage in my service, and I will protect you externally, while you will be arrayed in your homes inside, sleeping in your beds. I will guard you outside and around your beds. And come and see, when those harmful types of creatures draw near a person's door, they raise their heads and look at the holy name which is visible outside, the name of Shakai, which is written Shin Daled Yud, but because it's the name of God, I don't write it that way, which is crowned in its crown. What they're talking about here, the name Shin Daled Yud does not appear inside the mezuzah, but the practice is that you take the scroll and you roll it up and you write it on the outside. So that's what's described here. That's also why you'll see on mezuzah cases very often a letter Shin to stand for that. So he says, look at when these forces look at the holy name, the name of Shakai, which is crowned in its crown, this name which rules over all of them, they are frightened and they flee, and they do not draw near to the person's door. Rabbi Yitzchak replied, then one should write this name and no more on the entrance to his home. Why write the entire portion? What are you bringing me a whole 2 paragraphs and all that? It will be a lot less expensive, right? Just write Shin Daled Yud and you're done. Rabbi Abba replied, This name is not crowned other than by these letters, which are all inscribed in the king's roster. And when this entire portion is recorded, then this name is crowned in its crown, and the king emerges with all of his forces, which are recorded in the king's roster, and the harmful creatures are frightened, and they flee from before him. The idea of the roster, think of like you have your list of soldiers who are fighting in the army. That's the image here. It's on there. This is the roll. And the idea is these letters, these paragraphs, when they appear with this name of God, they're what gives it the power, the force to be meaningful. And Rabbi Abba said, one more point, how many holy forces are arrayed when a person places a mezuzah on his gate. They all announce, this is the gate of God. The share of Israel, that's a quote from Tehillim, from Psalms. The share of Israel is meritorious, and thus the Jews are known as the children of the Holy King, for all of them bear his sign. They are marked in their homes with the mezuzah at the entrance. Now, we have all sorts of stories about mezuzot, right? I think I may have mentioned this story. I have this memory of mentioning it in this room, but I think it was a conversation after class. But a few weeks back, a couple of months ago actually by now, I was teaching a class on the Torah portion of Bo, which has the story of the Korban Pesach, the Pesach sacrifice, and you take the blood from the Korban Pesach and it's put on the doorpost. We'll have to come back to that as part of our discussion. But I was talking about the connection between that and the mezuzah. There's a woman at the class who told me a story that had happened to her the day before. So number one, it's a first-person story. And number two, it had happened the day before. So you haven't had time yet for this story to become embellished or forgotten or whatever. There was a person who was known for reading mezuzot and interpreting them, who came to town visiting. This happens. They go from place to place. They read people's mezuzot. They tell them mysteries that they see in the mezuzah, and they collect a fee. And the fee is used to support their yeshiva somewhere or their family or whatever it is that they're using the money for. So the woman tells me this story that someone had come to town and she had brought mezuzot from her house for him to look at. And number one, he told her about certain health issues of hers that she had not disclosed. And number two, he said, and you're missing 2 mezuzot in your basement. Which, in fact, they were. Now, you can tell me that beforehand maybe people make appointments. And he could theoretically do research online and discover stuff about somebody somehow. He could be an internet detective, right? And that's how he'll figure out the health stuff. But to know that you're missing 2 mezuzot in your basement, where in the world does that come from? Right. I'll give you a story that I know, because I was told this story by a relative of mine who I trust entirely. But this isn't first person, and that's why I bring it second. The story was that in my hometown, Oceanside in New York, one of these mezuzah readers had come to town, and there was a woman in the community who was married to a man who was not Jewish, and she had mezuzot because it was important to her, and she sent the mezuzot with somebody else because she didn't want to go to the Mekubal herself, to the Kabbalist herself. And she sends the mezuzot with somebody else. And the person comes to this mezuzah reader, shows him the mezuzot, and he says 2 things. Number one, he says, these aren't yours. Number one. And number two, he said, these aren't yours. And number two, he says in Hebrew, sagar rachma, which is a phrase that's used in Tanakh to say that the person cannot have children, that God has closed up their womb, which was indeed the problem that this woman had. That was why she had sent the mezuzot, because she had been unable to have children. But again, how in the world he knows? I have no idea. I'm a rationalist. I don't like stories like this. But at the same time, they're there, and I don't understand them. And the question is, within Judaism, how do we look at things like this? How does that fit? Where does what place does mezuzah not as fulfillment of divine command? God said, write these 2 paragraphs down and put them on your doorpost. But instead as means of divine protection, or mystical, I don't know what, that tells you things about the life of the person who lives in the house where the mezuzah is posted, where in the world does that come from? It's only in mysticism. You ain't going to find that anywhere else. Yes?
This might sound rude, but where is the audacity in saying something like this, where so many people were not protected in their homes? I mean, this is basic level. Okay, this is not the top of the sphirot. But this is, it gives false security to people. And it is, we see throughout history that this does not protect. I mean, yes, my mezuzot protect me, but I live in a very safe country, Baruch Hashem. But it doesn't protect a lot of other people.
So let me ask you a question. Do people buy burglar alarms?
Sorry?
Do people buy burglar alarms?
Yeah.
Do people get big, scary dogs?
Yeah.
Right? Do people lock their doors? Do any of those have a perfect track record? No. The answer is, on a very practical, before we get to mezuzah, on a very practical level, there are things that you do because you believe that they are beneficial, and hopefully they are, but you don't get guarantees. And the same thing is certainly true when you're dealing with a case like this, where it's saying to you, God is going to protect you outside. It is not giving you any guarantees. Don't kid yourself. What it's trying to say is that there is some level of merit associated with the mezuzah. What that is, we need to discuss. But there's some level of merit such that God says, you're going to have extra protection because you did this. Ain't going to be perfect, but you get something out of it. You know, what you're asking reminds me of the classic passage in the Talmud about the boy who went to get eggs for his father. Remember the story? The Talmud tells the following story. Well, preface to the story. There are 3 mitzvot in the Torah for which we are told you will earn long life. One of them, an active mitzvah, is keeping honest weights and measures. This is the prohibition. Keeping honest weights and measures. In other words, don't deal with people dishonestly in business. You will have a long life. That's one. Separate from that are 2 active commandments, one of which is honor your parents, and the other one is, if you're going to take the eggs from a nest, make sure you send away the mother bird first. Shiluach hakein. Those are the mitzvah for which the Torah says you earn long life. The Talmud at the end of the volume called Chulin tells the story of one of the sages who watches the following scene play out. Father and son are walking. Father spots a bird's nest in a tree, says to his son, could you please bring me the eggs? The son, obeying his father, climbs the tree, chases away the mother bird, and then takes the eggs and falls on the way down. Dies. And the sage who watches this says, how can that be? These are the mitzvot that earn a person long life. How can it be that he fell and died? And all sorts of answers are offered, ranging from the idea that the Torah's term for long life actually doesn't have to be translated that way. Ya'arichun yamecha, to be arich, doesn't have to mean long. It can mean of improved quality. Ya'arichun yamecha, you will have an improved quality of life. I don't know how that's going to work for this kid. That's not funny. That's one answer. Another answer that's offered is, it doesn't mean in this world, it means in the next world, right? And that could be the answer. But the message that the Talmud is giving you by recording this story is that there are never guarantees. You're never getting guarantees of, do this and X will happen. So the big question that bothers me is not the question of, but people used mezuzot and they still suffered. The question I have is, where did you get the idea that it was protective at all? The Torah never said that. Where did this come from?
Well, that just it. It's right here.
Where? In the Zohar. But where did the Zohar get it from? Again, what are the mystics basing it on? You can always answer the way I said in week 1, which is, mysticism is just a tradition, and therefore you can't question it, you can't argue it, it simply is. But that's what we're talking about, is where does this fit into mysticism's understanding of the way the world works? And is this something with a reflection in mainstream Judaism? And I'm going to go further now because it's getting late, and we've got a lot to say. So, first of all, you have to know the idea of mezuzah as protective is extremely controversial in Judaism. Not straightforward at all. Some sources, traditional ones, will accept it and even support it, and others fly in the face of it. Take a look at source number 10, a passage from the Talmud in Menachot, talking about what has today become the car mezuzah. Anyone have you seen a car mezuzah?
Yes.
Right, that people have those? There's absolutely no mitzvah whatsoever of having a mezuzah in your car. None whatsoever. They at the gift shop, I'm sure.
Unless you live there.
But even if you live in the car, no, there's no mitzvah of putting a mezuzah in your car. This practice is an old one, because in the Talmud they talk about people who would travel from place to place and stay in an inn, and they carried a mezuzah with them. So if one suspends a mezuzah from a pole or places it behind the door, there is danger. One has not fulfilled the mitzvah. One commentator on it says, yes, it's dangerous to have poles with things hanging from them around. You get hurt. The servants of King Munbaz did this when they stayed in an inn as a memorial for the mezuzah. I always want to remember the mezuzah, so therefore I'm going to have a mezuzah with me. But Rashi comments on this. Rashi is generally speaking a rationalist. He says, since you practice mezuzah improperly, the house is not protected from mazikin. Mazikin, harmful forces. Practicing mezuzah improperly makes you vulnerable to harmful forces. Take a look at source number 11. This is a practical statement. This becomes relevant when people move, dealing with the question of when you move from one home to another, do you take the mezuzot with you? Take a look at the comment of Tosfot in source number 11. Tosfot is a collection. It's an anthology of commentaries to the Talmud. And he's commenting on the Talmudic statement that when you move out of a house, you don't remove the mezuzah. Although Shmuel, the Talmudic sage, ruled you're allowed to transfer tzitzit fringes from one garment to another. I have a four-cornered garment that has strings on it for tzitzit. And that garment just becomes dirty over time, or it gets torn, or I outgrow it. And now I want to have a different four-cornered garment. I want to take the strings from the old one and put it on the new one. He says, that's fine. You're allowed to do that. But this is prohibited regarding mezuzah. You can't transfer the mezuzah from one house to another. Why? Not because the mezuzah is disqualified, but because damaging forces come into a house which has no mezuzah. Thus, one who removes the mezuzah damages those who will dwell in the house. You're allowing harm in.
Even if non-Jews live there?
So, even if non-Jews, you're not allowed to. The only reason why you'd be allowed to with non-Jewish residents is because of a fear that because they don't know what a mezuzah is, they're going to move in, they're going to say, oh, they left this on the doorpost and throw it in the trash. Because you want to avoid the mezuzah being disgraced, so you take the mezuzah with you. But otherwise, you're not allowed to create a situation in which you enable harm to come to the home. But what in the world are you talking about? What is this? The mezuzah is just another mitzvah. How did this happen? Well, when you get to medieval times, what you actually find is not only did people believe that it was protective, as Rashi is indicating here, as Tosfot is indicating here, but they used to add all sorts of stuff to mezuzot. Meaning, the core text in the mezuzah has two paragraphs from the Chumash. I included them on your source sheet as sources 22 and 23. They're the paragraphs you're familiar with from the Shema. We'll get to them eventually, not this week, but next week. That's what's written inside your mezuzah. You roll the scroll closed, and then you have the Shin, Daled, and Yud, name of God, on the outside. And there's another inscription as well that we'll get to that's on the outside, which we're not ready for yet. But in addition to that, people would write names of angels in their mezuzah.
On the cloth.
On the parchment with the paragraphs of the Shema. Take a look at source number 12. Rabbi Moses Maimonides did not like this idea at all. Yes, but they would have, they're the same because you write them the same. If the Sofer decides to add something, then it's not going to be the same. So he says, the practice has spread to write on the external surface of the mezuzah, opposite the blank space between paragraphs, shakai. In other words, on one side of the mezuzah, you have one paragraph, space, second paragraph, roll it closed. On the outside, opposite that blank space, so it doesn't interfere with reading what's on the flip side, you would have Shin, Dalet, and Yud. And he says, that's fine, it's on the outside. Those who write the names of angels inside, though, or the holy names, names of God, or a verse, or a seal, some kind of a charm, are in the category of those who have no share in the next world. It is not enough for these fools that they annul the mitzvah. They also take a great mitzvah, the declaration of the unified name of God, love of God, service of God, and treat it as an amulet for their personal benefit, as it has entered their foolish hearts that this is something meant to provide them with pleasure in this vain world. Maimonides is not known for mincing words. When he believes you're wrong, he will say so. Right? If you remember, we had a session at one point on sorcery, right, where the Torah prohibits sorcery, and there are various reasons that are given. And Maimonides, when he talks about it, says it's because you are prohibited from being foolish. He says being foolish is a violation of the Torah's laws. So therefore, don't practice sorcery. He has more to say than that. That's one piece. But the point is that he tells you straight out that don't treat the mezuzah as a good luck charm. You want to write the name of God on the outside? It's on the outside. It's the name of God. One name, that's fine. Angels, incantations, this ain't an amulet. That's not what this is for. The Tur, Rabbi Yaakov ben Asher, in source number 13, adds one other element that people add to the mezuzah, which is still done to this day. It is kuzu b'muchsaz kuzu. If I were to write it out in Hebrew, it will be kaf vav zayin vav, bet mem vav kaf, samach vav zayin, and then kaf vav zayin vav. I'm stressing how it will be spelled in order to explain what in the world it means. Anyone figure out what kuzu b'muchsaz kuzu might mean? It's a code. I think I might have mentioned it actually when we did Daniel. Like the code in Daniel, exactly. And according to one of the views in the Gemara there, it is that code that they used. There are 3 different views there we had about what the code was there. But the way it works is, if you envision the name of God, the 4-letter name of God, Yud, Hey, Vav, and Hey, transpose the letters, shifting them 1 letter ahead in the alphabet. Yud becomes Kaf, Hey becomes Vav, Vav becomes Zayin, Hey becomes Vav. Kuzu is Yud, Hey, Vav, and Hey, shifted 1 letter forward in the alphabet. Bimuchzaz is Elokeinu, shifted 1 step forward, and then Kuzu is, so it's Hashem, Elokim, Hashem, shifted 1 letter ahead in the alphabet. Also very strange. Take a look at source number 13.
What's the purpose of doing this?
Take a look at number 13. Rabbi Yaakov ben Asher. It's worth knowing a little bit about him. You see his odd place of residence.
Yeah.
I listed here, Germany and then Spain. He lived in Germany along with his family. His father, Rabbeinu Asher, was a leading authority in Jewish law. And due to persecution, the Jews of the community were driven out, and they fled from Germany to Spain and became very, very important figures. Because you're leaving Germany, the home of Ashkenaz Judaism, and you move to Spain, Sfarad, right? And Rabbeinu Asher, the father, and Rabbeinu Yaakov, the son, were both very instrumental in the communication of Jewish law. Their work becomes really important because it's informed by both communities. So, my father, my master, Rabbeinu Asher, wrote the following, and now it's basically a quote from the writings of Rabbeinu Asher in his laws of Mezuzah. Customarily, people write Shakai on the outside. Again, that name, Shin Daled Yud, on the space between the paragraphs. And so is the custom in Germany and France to write on the outside letters which are opposite the 14-letter name, Hashem, Elokeinu, Hashem. Letters which are adjacent in the alphabet, these are Kuzu b'muchzaz Kuzu. So they write that on the outside as well. And he just says, this is what we do. He doesn't tell you why. Inside, though, one should not add anything at all. One should also not make seals which appear as though he were making a protective amulet. Rather, he should perform the mitzvah appropriately to fulfill the statement of the blessed Creator, and he will protect us and save us on our right hand. God will protect us when we perform the mitzvah. And that's the core idea that you get when you read Rabbi Yosef Karo, who was author of the Code of Jewish Law, the Shulchan Aruch, in source number 14. He first quotes the sources that say the mezuzah does provide protection, and then he says, therefore one must say it is true that the mezuzah protects the house when the mezuzah is written properly without names of angels written in it. Further, when one makes a mezuzah, one does not intend to guard the house, but rather to fulfill the mitzvah of God. The automatic result is protection of the home. The rationalist view is mezuzah provides protection just like any mitzvah provides protection. Any mitzvah that you do declares, I am a believer in God. Mezuzah maybe more so than others, in the sense that you're putting it up there for the world to see, and you're augmenting it by inscribing the name of God on the outside. But stop short of considering it a good luck charm. That's the rationalist take. But that's not good enough for the mystics. That's not what's driving them. Because they don't talk about this kind of protection with other mitzvot. You're telling me that mitzvot provide protection. We do have an idea in the Talmud of mitzvot providing protection as a general principle, Torah study providing protection, but nothing like what you see regarding mezuzah, and not with the stories that you see regarding mezuzah. Where people, if someone has, God forbid, some tragedy in their home, people take the mezuzah to be checked, to make sure that there's nothing wrong with my mezuzah. Where does this fit in? So I want to start us on the idea, and then we'll complete it in the beginning next time, I expect, and we still have to discuss Shabbos next time. We have the mysticism of Shabbat as well. But the theme within Kabbalah that's going to relate to the mezuzah is the creation of divine space in our world. The idea that this physical universe has to have a home for God, and that's what we accomplish in a variety of ways. We are sanctifying space. Take a look, please, at source number 15, passage from the Zohar. Rabbi Elazar began. He quotes a verse from Yeshaya, from Isaiah. Why have I come and no one is there? Madua bati ve'in ish is the text in Yeshaya. Why have I come? Israel is beloved before God, for wherever they live, God is found among them, so that his love will never leave them. In other words, when God describes himself coming in and finding there's no one there, what that means is God wants to reside among us. Going back towards prayer, the Talmud actually uses that line to describe what happens if there's a time called for services and there isn't a minyan at the beginning. So God shows up and says, where is everybody? I showed up, they're not there. A little bit of lesson there in coming on time to services. But the way it works, though, the way that God is among us is that we bring God in. And that happens throughout the Torah. Take a look at source number 16, the best example. The Mishkan, the temple the Jews traveled with in the wilderness. God says, V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti betocham. They shall make a sanctuary for me, and I will live among them. That's easy. But it's not only when you build a home for God. It's not only in the Mishkan. Take a look at number 17. Guard my mitzvot and fulfill them. I am God. Do not desecrate my holy name, and I will be sanctified among the Jewish people. Betoch b'nei Yisrael. I'm going to be among you. I am God who sanctifies you. But God is sanctified in our midst when we perform mitzvot. Another example, this one from Tehillim, from Psalms. A song of Asaph. God stands in the community of God. He judges among the judges. Meaning, when you convene to carry out justice, to hear cases, to take care of the needs of the vulnerable, and so on, then God says, I am present in the courtroom. There are ways in which our activities bring God into a space. And the truth is, there's a lot to be said about this regarding doorways and entrances in the Torah specifically. Doorways always have special meaning. Things happen at entrances. Whether positive or negative. Whether you're talking about the entrance to Gan Eden, where God appoints the Kruvim when he kicks out Adam and Chava, whether you're talking about the entrance to the Teva, to the boat, that Noah has, where God closes the door on his behalf, whether you're talking about the gates of the city of Sodom, where Lot meets the angels, the entrance of Abraham's tent, entrances are accentuated.
And Eli also.
Oh, many, many more, but Eli at the entrance of the Mishkan, and so on. But what this means, you have to ask yourself, if God is everywhere, what does this actually mean? Right? God is everywhere. So what do you mean God is in a particular space? So here, I go back to the original mezuzah, which I mentioned before. We only have like 2 minutes left, but let's see what I can say. We'll come back to the Zohar on this next time, but just the idea. Remember that Korban Pesach, the sacrifice that the Jews made right before leaving Egypt. And they take the blood of the Korban and they put it on the doorposts and they put it on the lintel, right? And it's a bizarre thing to do. Judaism in general says treat blood with respect. When you slaughter the animal, you're supposed to cover the blood. You're not allowed to eat blood. You're not allowed to treat it with disrespect. However, what you're doing in that case is you are inviting God into the home by marking the home as this is a home dedicated for God. There's more to be said. I'm going to have to come back to that next week. I just wanted to start the idea. There's more to say. So God willing, next week we will wrap up Mezuzah as well as Shabbat, Chag, Purim Sameach. Have a wonderful, wonderful Purim. Thank you.